I would like to give the floor to Carl Schultz. He's from the Higher Ground Foundation. He's IPAM chair, and he will give us an introductory word for IPAM. Thank you, Carl.
Thank you, Marta. That guidance, I think, is really important. So please, everyone, take to heart all of those rules. I think it'll make a much more effective webinar. And thanks, everyone, for taking the time to join us as we open the IPAM to membership. We do live in challenging times. Many of us have had to adapt in many fairly severe ways as nature brings the COVID pandemic around the world. And I don't want to dwell on it, but how we as individuals and communities and countries have adapted has shown to bring about very different results. So the how on adaptation is very important. So next slide, please. So today, this is what we hope to accomplish. We want to talk to you about why we feel it's important to have the International Platform on Adaptation Metrics, give you a little short origin story of how it has developed, consider the structure and activities that we have organized and planned, discuss how you can get involved, whether you're an institution, an individual expert, or a funder. Finally, we're very, very interested in eliciting your feedback. And so we're going to have a number of polls throughout the webinar and also a dedicated session for discussion at the end. And we're really curious to learn what questions you have, what comments you have, what ideas you could bring to the table. So we're very much looking forward to that. Next slide. So I don't want to dwell on adaptation, but as we know, the fundamental reason for our meeting is to do better adaptation. The Earth is heating up. Under any scenario, it's going to heat up more. Consequences translate into climate impacts, and these generally result in monumental damage or loss to households, to communities, industries, the global economy, and nature. As I mentioned, adaptation is critical, and how one adapts will impact how well they survive. As Darwin has noted, those that are most adaptable are the ones who survive and hopefully thrive. So next slide. Another cliche phrase that I think, however, is true is that what gets measured gets done. And there are better and worse adaptations. There are maladaptations. There are more and less effective adaptations. And to be effective, to guide adaptation, metrics are necessary. To be effective, metrics are needed to assess everything from vulnerability, so we can focus on where it matters most, all the way to measuring the results of adaptation. Metrics can enhance project efficiency. They can help in allocation of finite financial and other resources and allow for a way to understand the relative effectiveness of competing adaptations. So next slide. Unfortunately, there is no international space to focus expertise on the considerable challenges related to adaptation metrics. And this is reflected, among other things, in the massive gap between adaptation needs and adaptation investment deployed. And one of the fundamental barriers and a key global challenge for our time, we believe, is that there's really a lack of consensus on metrics for the appropriate area so that we can enable better decisions. And this applies particularly relevantly to investment. Next slide. So that's why we forward the IPAM as the reference platform for adaptation metrics. So we can work together as a group of professionals, all of us, vested in the adaptation space, to develop metrics and enabling tools to serve the adaptation imperatives. And we want to create synergies to bring forward metrics across the range of functions and practices: science, governance, management, M&E, communications, capacity, and finance. We want IPAM to be a platform to enable metrics harmonization and transdisciplinary co-learning. Next slide. So how are we going to make this happen? We have some explicit objectives. We want to connect the variety of different professionals that bring need and can help identify and build appropriate metrics. We also intend to develop viable practices, tools, and facilities that enable improved adaptation finance and policy decision-making. And will be a platform for information and know-how sharing, along with, as we see possible, harmonization and consensus on metrics. Next slide, please. So let me back up a bit, though, and discuss very briefly how we got to where we are today. One could say it all started in 2016 when Morocco had the presidency to the Conference of Parties, and Conference of Parties was held in Marrakesh. Prior to Marrakesh, there was a pre-COP conference where the issue was formally articulated, and the findings from that conference on adaptation metrics were integrated into the Conference of Parties. So next slide. But that wasn't the end of it. The following year, with the hosting of Mohammed VI Polytechnic University in their excellent facilities outside of Marrakesh, we created a follow-up conference where we focused on metrics for water and agriculture, which are the two major sectors cited in nationally determined contributions. What we found from this conference is that even between these related sectors, there were different approaches that are challenging to compare, which showed us all of the considerable challenges for adaptation metrics overall. So next slide. So the following year, again at UM6P, which is also a co-founding member of the IPAM, we held another conference. At this conference, we also invited the IPCC to present on the special report on 1.5 degrees. And we preceded the event with an advanced course on adaptation metrics. One thing that was different about the conference itself was that we added resilient cities to the themes. Next slide. So following that, we held another workshop outside of Rabat last year. And the aim of that was to take the momentum that had built and try to create what we now call IPAM. So next slide. So IPAM started with 5 founding members that serve as the key institutions that have worked through over this year to develop the IPAM and do the planning. Next slide. And the result of this, that we created a steering committee of the founding institutions, and we organized some sectoral and functional practice subcommittees where we envision most of the work is going to be undertaken. We also, however, with the steering committee, cross-committee integration and harmonization and knowledge sharing will occur. We also now are seeking institutional expert and sponsorship support. And we're going to be going forward over the next year to build up the subcommittees, build up the work plans, and develop work that's based on member direction, along with seeking resources so that we can be an effective organization and have some tangible work. Next slide. So I'd just like to kick this off by saying that if you agree that the better formation of adaptation metrics is a critical challenge, consider joining us and listen to what we have to say during this hour and a half, and also let your colleagues know about us as well. So, as I mentioned, we're trying to make this as interactive as possible. So we're going to have a poll question now. So you can choose up to 3. And the question is, what do you feel are the priority adaptation metric challenges? We have a multiple choice here.
Okay, so I would like to give the floor now to Mr. Moxit, IPCC General Secretary. Welcome. Thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you very much for this opportunity to invite me for this very interesting event. And as Dr. Schultz said, IPCC was also invited in 2017 to provide presentation about the last report. And I'm really happy to come this time also, and also to share with you what is the vision about how we are dealing with adaptation metrics. I think I will go fast because I want to focus more on very recent result, and but always we need to start by some terminology aspect. What are the metrics? And yes, and you know of them. But what is really important is that metrics need to be relevant to stakeholders, farmer association and all, and also simple as possible, easy to measure and to compute, and also to communicate and also to measure in standard way. So also it is related also to have precise consideration of scale. And when we are dealing with adaptation, we should really focus more what is the range of time and space that is dealing with adaptation. And then we can introduce the planification process, what is reactive adaptation and what is planned adaptation. Oh, yes, I already said that it should be relevant to stakeholders, but stakeholders themselves are sometimes inundated by many concepts. What is adaptation metrics? What is vulnerability? What is sensitivity? What is sustainability? And I think, as I said, stakeholder can be farmer. We should really provide a good terminology and to not create any confusion for this stakeholder. For example, vulnerability is the function from exposure, sensitivity, adaptive capacity. Already the metrics about adaptation are elements for the vulnerability. And also what is really interesting in this table, we have many categories and also what are kind of vulnerability criteria are associated. And then we have the indices, and there are different indices associated with many groups and many categories. For example, the one related to the category of agricultural system characteristics, we can have three indices: technological change, arable percentage of arable land currently in use, percentage in rainfall, crop, irrigated crop. But this is connected to adaptive capacity. The others are different. And also what is really related to have a good metrics about adaptation is also related to the context. And just I can show that this, for example, it depends if you have to deal with land fragmentation or not. And this is something which is critical because to adapt to something less fragmented is more easy to adapt to something too much fragmented. Also, for something which is really also important related to this adaptation metric is the concept of with or without. And here you have, for example, some information about the impact and adaptation on cereal production. And we have, it is just symbolic, we have two schemes when it is with adaptation and without adaptation. That means the role of the metric should be really very precise to show the difference between what is adapted and the one which is not adapted. And also in the process, in all this seamless process, for example, when we are dealing with many scenarios, all the technology scenarios should have a good metrics, because with this we can have a good possible outcomes. So I think metrics in agriculture, I am not going to repeat this because it was already introduced by Dr. Schulz, but yes, I wish climate change is there, but climate change metrics can be mapped onto exposure sensitivity and adaptive capacity. And also we should not forget that there are some tools, science data, science on data that say the data for science. So also sometimes those are kind of proposed metrics, but what is really also very interesting here is the importance of units. And this is something also that can push to have a standardization in all the indices and the metrics used, for example, in agriculture and which will be used in adaptation system. Now, the adaptation itself is also connected to the context, because you see here one city, and there are many aspects related to one city with this huge and density, and this that increase the vulnerability. But this we can, if we have to take away one message, it is to say that in their development make cities vulnerable regardless of the type of the risk. That means once again, the metric of adaptation should be also be connected to how the development is in place. So for example, we can see what kind of some possibility to measure the capacity to adapt to climate change. And for example, there are some indices here, the percentage of population with risk reducing infrastructure, the population illegal housing. This is very important. Sometimes it seems minor, but it is very important. Local government investment capacity, it is about finance, and also institution, also an ecological infrastructure, and the capacity if it is intact or it is damaged. And also, not only this, there are also some aspects related to the ability of to access to adaptation dividend. For example, in developed country, the ability is great, is high, where in developing country it is too slow. That means even the adaptation can be connected. The same thing about spectrum of urban adaptive capacity. Those are aspects also to take in consideration. I will go quickly because there are very, very important indications here. So the one key message to take away, potential to address root causes of poverty and failure in sustainable development, including the need for rapid progress on mitigation. This has the ability to fundamentally change the attribute urban system. So I think something we should not forget that the adaptation is also connected to the degree of mitigation. And in one word, in one sentence, to adapt to very already very hot scenario is too difficult, too even impossible compared to adapt to a scenario around 2 degrees C. That means when it is already hot, when it is burning, it is too late to adapt. And this is something we can have, we can, have many ideas about one city and to try to have this potential of adaptation regarding the capacity of mitigation. So those are the last outcome from IPCC in this 6th cycle, the 3 special report. And what it shows that about the risk, when we are comparing between the limits under 1.5 degree and 2.52 degrees, I think that there is more risk under 2.2 on the anomaly of 2 degrees C compared to 1.5. But as far it is increasing temperature, the anomaly of temperature is increasing, I think the risk is more important. But that means capacity of adapting is also, compromised. This is what we are doing now. It is not already ready. I think the working group 2 of IPCC, which is in charge of vulnerability, impact, and adaptation, is dealing with all what you have in front of you in this slide. But I wonder, I am asking you, I am seeking from you to see how much the word adaptation is repeated in this slide. And not only this, how many adjectives are associated to the word adaptation here. That means any metric for adaptation should be associated to all those adjectives in order to have a clear picture. And this is, you can expect this in the late 2022 when we will approve the report for working group 2 about IPCC and mainly regarding the adaptation. Now, what we have now, I think we, in the process of working group 2, we built on our 5 outcomes. We used the scenarios, associated risk, residual risk, adaptation and finance. I'm thinking R5, the adaptation and finance was there, but now we also trying to include something which is new, like a consideration of minorities like indigenous and local knowledge, nature-based solution, ecosystem conservation, the pandemic as COVID-19, the feasibility and enabling condition, limit to adaptation, and not only limit to adaptation, even the concept of maladaptation. And this is something which is really critical and this should be considered. Also, we have migration and conflicts. So the same thing, I think we should, any metric of adaptation should be handled in parallel with all this, what is current now, and like sustainable development goals. And we should have a sort of comparison and how we can see one metric can feed the other. The last thing I want, last slide, is to say, even under the sea level rise and what is related to local relocation and also adaptation in site, it is also very important. For example, the case of this large tropical agricultural delta, we can see that the adaptation inside can be more efficient than relocation. And those are kind of information that are useful to have a clear adaptation metrics that should inform the stakeholder, mainly the policymaker, because the policymaker, like authorities and so, need simple information to take decision. Taking decision is mobilizing resources, finance resources, human resources. That means they need exactly the good information inside. And also, they need also information for reactive adaptation as well as planned adaptation. And this is something which is we should take in consideration even in the metrics. And last thing I want to say, we should connect adaptation and mitigation, because sometimes we can have another value to adapt to some scenario where we can have still some possibility to adapt. That means when we have limitation and good mitigation process. So thank you, and I should say that all these slides are also were provided coming from IPCC community and authors, and mainly the working group to co-chair Hans Faulkner and Deborah Robert, and also Cynthia Rosenberg and many colleagues. So thank you very much for your attention, and I apologize if I took long. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Morsit. Really interesting facts, and that I'm sure that we are going to engage with them during the webinar today. And now I would like to give the floor to Mrs. Avril Lemseffer, Director General of the AAA Initiative, who is a founding member of IPAM, to give an opening word for today. Welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marta. I'll try to be very quick. I'm extremely happy to be with you this morning, because it's for us a real output of a lot of work and a lot of energy from all the members of IPAM, all the staff, and there are a lot of people working hard behind this. And I have, of course, a special thought to Karim and Gay, to Riyad, and well, everybody in the team. So when we joined this IPAM adventure, we were absolutely convinced by the relevance of such a work and such a project, especially for the African continent, because we represent the African continent, and of course for the whole world. And it was it was clear for us and obvious that we want to have a special role and a special action in the agenda of the adaptation metrics. I will not, come back to the adaptation figures, because they have been mentioned by Dr. Morset. They have been tremendously mentioned by Dr. Morset, and I thank him very much for his tremendous presentation. But it is, I would like just to say that we in the adaptation community, let's call it like this, we are very happy that, and I think that everybody has noticed the same thing, is that in the last months there is a real consciousness all over the world about adaptation, the importance of adaptation. And I think that through the webinar of today, where we want to inform, to recruit a vast community of expert institutions, international organizations, funders, it is, it's, I think that we are building something, and we still have a lot of work. We still have a lot of exchanges to do. We still have a lot of knowledge to gather, and we still have a lot of tools to develop to succeed in our mission into putting and building those metrics for adaptation. So the AAA Initiative Foundation, as the IPAM Secretariat, is well, making all the necessary efforts. On one hand, to really impulse the maximum of energy that we can into the IPAM platform, but also on the other hand, in the political side, you know that AAA Initiative is mandated by 37 African countries, each one by his own, but also is mandated by the African Union. So we are using all our political basic or political platform to promote IPAM, promote the importance and the relevancy to work much more in the adaptation metrics. And well, to finish, and I will conclude on that, I think that this work of putting some monitoring, putting some evaluation into all the work that it's done in the adaptation all over the world. It's also extremely important because it's a way for us to have the figures, and as a consequence to have the arguments each time to convince the institutions, the donors and the funders to put more and more energy on the adaptation field. So thank you. We'll be happy to answer any question after, and again, welcome for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Lensefer, on behalf of the IPAM Secretariat. I would like to give the floor now to Riyad Balaghi from the III Foundation to explain a little bit more the details on the subcommittee's purpose. Please, Riyad, can you put on your video?
Yes. Do you hear me, Marta?
Yes.
Thank you, Marta. So, a few minutes before, our chair explained that our activities are divided into subcommittees, since assessing the global adaptation progress requires metrics that are applicable across countries and sectors and over time. There is unfortunately no simple, unique, and universal adaptation matrix that has been recalled by Mr. Moxit that can be used over economic sectors for agriculture, water, energy, or whatever. And that's because the complexity of adaptation processes and the particularity of adaptation at various temporal, spatial, economic, social, and cultural scales, but also the diversity of resources, vulnerabilities, and adaptive capacity needs to work in subcommittees. So that to address specifically each of the sectors, thematics, disciplines, teams, sites, or dimension of adaptation. And we divided also our work and activities in subcommittees because considering this common aim of establishing efficient monitoring and evaluation system, while addressing the special needs of each sector, IPAM has decided for the time being to divide his works in 4 subcommittees, but others are welcome, of course. And for the time being, the subcommittees are steered for agriculture by the AAA initiative, for cities by the Basque Center for Climate Change in Spain, for water, it is steered by the African Science, Research and Innovation Council of the African Union, and for techniques and tools by our chair, Karl Schulz, of the Higher Ground Foundation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Riyad. So now I would like to give the floor to Dries Wasser from ASRIC to present the IPAM Water Subcommittee. Please, Dries, if you can turn on your video.
Okay, Marta, thank you.
I think, okay.
That's fine. Is it okay?
Yes, perfect.
Yes, thank you, Marta. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I am pleased to introduce the Water Subcommittee of IPAM on behalf of the African Scientific Research and Innovation Council, which is constituted by a Congress, a scientific committee, and some elected members of the Bureau representing North Africa, South Africa, East, West, and Central Africa. And it is a kind of Pan-African platform to deal with science, technology, innovation, following the STISA 2024 or other initiatives. Now, let's talk about the water adaptation mechanism that is really a requirement because of many things, the resource itself, as water is a good and the risk in terms of quality and quantity and possible damage that can happen from flooding or drought or pollution. And then there is also the form of water itself. We have conventional waters in terms of surface and groundwaters, and we have the so-called non-conventional waters in wastewater treatment and coming also from desalination of seawater and brackish waters. And we have multiple usages, and agriculture is, of course, the first consumer, and domestic and industrial, without forgetting the nature. And we hardly need approaches and methodologies, as mentioned by Carl, our chairman, to quantify, protect, plan, manage, implement adaptation actions to include climate change effects and impact through methodologies, metrics, and techniques, as already discussed by the excellent talk of our friend Abdullah Muqsit. The objectives are to sensitize and highlight the value of water in terms of quality, quantity, and usages, and also the importance of its wise use. Promote water-related data observatories, especially in Africa, as you know all that data matters for further steps. Estimate the impact of climate change on all types of water resources and hydraulic infrastructures. Develop new methods and realistic assumptions for hydraulic infrastructure calculations, because we can no longer use the so-called return period to design dams, because we have non-stationary hydrology. Put more emphasis on education through tutorials, online and discussion forums and portals. And finally, co-develop, co-construct, share, evaluate methods and techniques, integrated planning, combining the paradigms of integrated water resources management and the nexus. Decision-making and water metrics, combining also advanced systems analysis and numerical technologies, embodying artificial intelligence concept, data, science, modeling, simulation, and optimization. Next, please. In this slide, we will highlight the main point in a voting format or polling format. You have to select some of the answers.
Thank you very much for your participation. And now I would like to give the floor to Carl Schulz to explain the IPAM tools and techniques subcommittee. So please, Carl, if you can put your video.
I should be here.
Yeah.
Thanks, Marta. So now with my chair hat as Tools and Techniques Subcommittee, I'd like to just say that, it goes without saying that metrics are challenging, owing to at least three different factors. One, it's the case that adaptation happens in complex systems, and the interactions within the systems and the needs for metrics are likewise bound in these complexities. And then secondly, metrics are not like tons of carbon dioxide, a physical thing. They are often physical, but they're also social, economic, and political. And thirdly, the evidence that needs to support metrics is often hard to come by, or of questionable quality, or different from place to place, and so very difficult to compare. So there are many challenges, but we're in an environment now where there are so many exciting techniques and tools that we can deploy to address these. For one, digital tech gives us a lot of opportunities for better data quality and assurance and means of processing and conveying. Decision sciences give us insights and means of foresight and analyzing and processing data and science for better decision making. Social sciences, writ large, gives us ways of procuring data, deploying metrics, and most importantly, perhaps understanding what counts for whom, and which may lead to climate justice and climate just adaptation. In the business and government worlds, we have lots of experiences and also solutions that can help, be it insurance solutions, data coming from censuses and stuff like that. And not least, I think it's important to note that art and civil society teach us what matters for people and the planet, and so cannot be forgotten when we're considering metrics. So next slide. So the Techniques and Tools group will work to tap these resources and approaches. And, the work shall include identifying and sharing and assessing, working to build and pilot adaptation metrics tools. We'll be encouraging going beyond the state of the art in the area of data and foresight and metrics and M&E and decision making. And finally, will be a space for different disciplines to work together and also represent issues and sectors that aren't directly associated with the sectoral subcommittees like health or disaster risk reduction. So I'd just like to say, please engage with IPAM and with our work on techniques and tools, and consider joining this group if you're interested in these really exciting opportunities that are there for us to build and adapt and deploy adaptation metrics. So thanks, and now for our poll. So I'm just going to, if we can show the questions, and then we'll just take about 45 seconds for people to select up to 3.
I would like to give the floor to Riyad Balaghi to explain the IPAM Agriculture Subcommittee. Thank you, Riyad.
Thank you, Marta. Of course, the agriculture sector was highlighted in the previous conferences on adaptation metrics as one of the main sectors affected by climate change, and that could contribute to mitigate greenhouse gases. Of course, since there is a strong nexus between adaptation and mitigation. But why an agriculture subcommittee? Agriculture and therefore food security, as you know, and in the next future, and as projected from IPCC, the scenarios are very pessimistic, and that's why we need to urgently take some ambitious action. And for that, we need to have the scientific ground, the technological ground for that. And since agriculture is a very complex and multidimensional sector, so a wide range of adaptation metrics can be used to measure the social, economic, environmental side of adaptation, and to monitor and evaluate agricultural projects, so that to assess whether they are of a benefit from smallholder farmers, but also to assess whether the funds allocated to the project on the ground are effective. So if you read the literature, you can find hundreds of metrics related to adaptation for agriculture. About just the CGR, he's noticed that about 400 metrics can be collected on adaptation for agriculture. Slide, please. Marta, thank you. So, next slide. Thank you. So what is the challenge before the objectives?
Sorry.
Thank you, Marta. So frameworks and metrics to track adaptation are still in their very early stages of development and application, despite, as I explained in the previous slide, already existing hundreds of quantitative and qualitative metrics that can be used to track adaptation in the agriculture sector, from local to global scale and for the diverse geographical and socioeconomic context. However, adaptation metrics could help quantifying how vulnerable and poor farmers increase their income, livelihood, and their adaptation to climate change through agri-food and natural resource management system that at the same time increase adaptation and mitigation of cost benefits. So our objective for this subcommittee is to develop pragmatic, comparable, standardized, and cost-efficient metrics to track performance of adaptation projects in the human, agri-environmental, financial dimension. And why? In order to help estimate the technology and knowledge gap and estimate the finance gap. That's maybe one of the most important goal by government, donors, banks, development agencies, and the private sector. And finally, better allocate resources and record how projects are converted to outcomes and impacts to better adapt to climate change, of course, in the framework of the agriculture strategies of the countries, their NDCs, their national adaptation plans, and toward in the framework of their biennial transparency reports. So you are welcome to join this agriculture subcommittee if you're interested. We are very happy to welcome all expert institutions that are interested. And for the poll, we have some few questions. Please select three of these from your thoughts and what you think is very most relevant to address for this subcommittee. Please, you have 7 questions, but if none of this are relevant for you, we can discuss later on.
And now I would like to, give the floor to myself to present the IPAM City Subcommittee. The IPAM City Subcommittee is chaired by the Basque Center for Climate Change. This is located in northern Spain. It's a small research center of about 60 people. Well, why a city subcommittee? Well, there is ample evidence of global adaptation progress assessments pointing out that, some main messages. The first one is that progress is concentrated in larger and richer areas, urbanized areas around the world. In general, there is a lack of implementation. All these policies, programs, and projects are still not being implemented or fully implemented. Finally, we know that there is not effective integration of adaptation monitoring and evaluation frameworks in decision-making processes in practice. And this is all about metrics, all about our lack of knowledge about effective metrics to measure adaptation. And it's clear that what gets measured gets done. So we need to close this cycle to facilitate implementation, experimentation, and learning, therefore advance in our adaptation processes. And the final goal of this city subcommittee is to advance in the co-creation of usable adaptation measurement frameworks and also metrics for local planning and management practice. We think that this will help stakeholders to, on one side, develop learning processes that can deliver practical and effective solutions, so to enable a larger adaptation solution space. Secondly, to measure benefits and also costs or avoided costs, and thus justify budgets that is really needed, and also justify political agendas. And in third place, increase the legitimacy of adaptation actions and also of adaptation investments. So those are like the 3 final aims that we have in the creation of this cities subcommittee. So I will urge you, all of you that have an interest in cities, in also in subnational action, to join this subcommittee. And I think that together, through great collaborative effort, we can really address this issue in the following years. And we plan to design a better, detailed, and robust action plan for this subcommittee in the following years. So now I would like to present the poll for cities. The main question that we thought it was interesting to know and to collect feedback is which are the barriers that you think are existing right now for the use of adaptation metrics in local planning practice. So here you can see 7 options. Please select as many options as you want. And yes, I would like to thank you for your participation in this poll, that I hope it will be useful to for the future design of this action plan in the subcommittees of cities. And I would like to give the floor to Karim Anegai, who is representing IPAM Secretariat from the very beginning of our adventure. And he's going to present the options and benefits of IPAM membership. Thank you, Karim.
Thank you, everybody. Hello. Can you start with the slides, please, Marta? As I counted the returns 2 days ago, we had 170 people who said they wanted to participate. As obviously you see that many more would be on the afternoon session than on the morning session. And it's interesting to see from which countries and from which part of the world they are coming. And what was interesting also was to notice that to the question if they were interested in the topics, the existing subcommittees, more than half to 2/3 said that yes, for each one of the 4 subcommittees that were presented. Other topics, as we asked them which ones they would be interested in, were environment, forestry, nature-based solution, health, energy policies, disaster risk, infrastructure, finance, social, local development. As you see, there are many topics of interest, and that all needs to be structured. So please, next slide. So, the way we structured the IPAM so far is that you can join in 4 different ways. You can join as an institutional member. That means that you will be granted voting right within the steering committee. In that way, you have to contact us, but only institutions can be granted a voting right. This is important. You can also, as a person, be an associate member. As an associate member, you won't have a voting right, such as participate to the steering committee directly as a person, but you can be involved in topic-oriented subcommittees. You participate to all our events, etc. For that, you will have to sign a charter. I insist that you can be representing an institution that is institutional member and be an associate member yourself. You can be, of course, a sponsor. For that, you don't need to be involved in committees or events, but you can. I mean, institutional members can be sponsor of, obviously, also. And anyone else interested can sign up to the mailing list. So that makes us come to the shortest and quickest and most important poll. Please. The questions are very simple. If you would like to join IPAM, what would you think of having your organization as an institutional member, be yourself an associate member, considering participating as a sponsor? Well, for that, I don't need the 150% answers. You can say that you're interested to join, but later, or that you're not interested to join at this point.
I would like to give now the floor to Carl. He's going to explain our project proposal on adaptation metrics mapping and evaluation. Please, Carl.
Thanks, Marta. I'm going to try to be quick, but I thought we should end our formal portion of this meeting by talking about something that we want to do. So the thought is that we should put together an adaptation metrics mapping evaluation project. It's a cross-committee project. The reason is that although the Paris Agreement doesn't really forward any specific mandate for saying these are the adaptation metrics that need to be deployed, nor does it request their development, there's some clear needs for adaptation metrics that are identified in both Article 7 and Articles 13 of the Paris Agreement that suggests a need for frameworks and metrics that are applicable across countries, sectors, and over time. So next slide, please. So another key report, the Adaptation Gap Report, outlines the criteria for how we should be thinking about indicators that further lend themselves to metrics writ large. And we hope to deploy these to understand and evaluate the position of different metrics in terms of usability, in terms of how much they can be aggregated, how transparent they are, can they be used over time, and so on. So next slide. So what do we intend to achieve here? Well, we will be, and we propose, undertake something that will support practitioners, funders, policymakers to really build on the existing emerging adaptation metrics. And we're going to be focusing on a strong user need approach. And so that we're focusing on what can actually be used, not just what sounds nice or would be nice. And what we're going to do in this is we have a two-phase perspective on how we do this. First of all, we're going to define what we mean by adaptation metrics, taking into account the varied user needs and standards. Then we'll survey the metrics that are out there and position them, as we noted in the Adaptation Gap Report criteria, and evaluate them in terms of usability at a minimum. And then we'll identify, define, and position the tools and techniques required to create and deploy the metrics. Then in a second phase, we'll be creating an open source tool, which is geographic in nature, for the collection of metrics from projects that can be used for also metrics generation and use, all the way to modeling. And finally, it can serve as a tool for capacity building and metrics sharing. So next slide. So what are the next steps? Well, we'd like to identify those of you who are interested in supporting the initiative, either through supporting the work and advising in terms of needs, because we want to have a multi-stakeholder approach to this, and so we can strengthen buy-in and also strengthen the expert and the financing needed to do this well. We also want to share the project concept with interested supporters, and so that they can help us to refine the concept and so that we can secure funding for this effort. And then we'd like to have a trans-subcommittee driven initiative where there will be a strong connection across the sectors and also the users and the tool builders. And then finally, we want to make sure that we're updating people on the project progress so that we can really have a broader IPAM and stakeholder community involved. So that's the project. Next slide. So if you are interested in this and want to learn more, we've developed a concept note and want to engage with everyone to make sure that this is done well. And so get in touch with us. That's all. I'd just like to have a little poll now. It's asking the question, what do you believe are the most critical gaps in publicly available information on adaptation metrics and tools? So you can select up to 3, and this could be useful in informing what we feel is necessary in terms of mapping.
We are now at the time that we would like to discuss a little bit the poll results so far, and for that we have Karl Schulz and Karim Manegai.
Okay, let's start with poll 1. I want to say that we are completely transparent here. meaning that we show it like it is, just exactly how many people answered. Of course, we don't put the name of the people, and well, all that will be shared with the slides of the whole conference and the link to the video footage. So I think, Carl, it's up to you. I don't know if there's much to comment now at this point. Shall we just display the polls one after the other?
We'll be sharing the poll results along with some other materials later on, so you'll have a chance to have a look at these in detail. In fact, I'd suggest that maybe what we should do is just move straight to discussion.
Okay, so I think that so far, I don't know if there were questions during in the chat. For that, Karim, please, if you can
Yes,
share them.
So far, the questions have been more on the organization, such as how can we join the committees? Can we join many communities at a time? Our institutional organization governmental, which of course they're not, and I answered already in the chat. But now, I mean, anybody who will have a question, please raise your hand, and you'll be granted the floor. You know how to raise your hand. You go to participants, and you have a little icon to raise your hand.
Yeah, once you are given the floor, you can turn on your video if you want, and also your audio. In any case, perhaps meanwhile, people get motivated to throw any questions.
I think Rani from
Gani,
UMCC,
yeah,
yes.
Please, Gani Seboni.
Yeah. Give the floor.
I will activate my. Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you very much. You have done a really tremendous job, both in terms of the organization and in terms of the design of the webinar. So as UMCSP, we are very happy to rejoin, not because as Carl and Karim stated, and Driss, we were involved from the beginning. I have a question, by the way. I think that there are four committees, and I'm suggesting to put together a transversal subcommittees dealing with the research, and they would explain why. I think that in each of these subcommittee, there is a real need to put together, dedicated research program in order to advance our understanding of the overall metrics business. Second advantage is we can gather and bring within IPAM other individual experts or organizations that are interested on the research issue. The fourth one is we will widen our spectra of donors. I know that there are some donors out there that they need to see some, state-of-the-art research on this issue. So my suggestion is, what do you think about putting together a transversal subcommittee dealing with research and education and capacity building, by the way, that will feed and be fed by the other subcommittees? Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question, Gani. Please, perhaps Carl, can you respond to that as chair?
Yeah, well, thanks, Gani. And again, we're very pleased that UM6P is a founding member of IPAM. Very much looking forward to our collaboration going forward. I think that's a really interesting idea. I think that research and capacity building are really a lot of what IPAM is aiming to do. Really, it's building up our capacity for understanding, being able to convey what metrics are out there, what's their usability. I think also it's important that we have a strong perspective on research, and that the work that we do is underpinned by strong research and research methodology. I might think that we should be considering this first project, this inaugural project, as an opportunity for us to explore how this could be done and what would be the implications in terms of how we organize the IPAM and the needs for, if there would be another subcommittee useful, or if there's some other sort of transdisciplinary activity or role that we need. So I thank you very much for that intervention. I think we definitely need to discuss it further. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Is there any other? Okay, David Williams, please, can you take the floor?
Hi, I hope you can hear me okay.
Yeah.
And thank you very much for the interesting presentations. My first question sort of leads on slightly to my prior speaker, which is that because I guess adaptation is such a sort of a locally dependent issue, there's a tremendous amount of disconnected work out there already. So I was wondering if it was the role of each subgroup to sort of have a look at what's out there and synthesize that, or if that's going to be if there's going to be one sort of larger synthesis that all the groups can work with. And my other question would be regarding outreach and communication. What are the strategies for trying to make people aware of this project? Because I find working with local stakeholders normally, particularly in those areas which are most vulnerable to climate change impacts, there really isn't much awareness of these sort of frameworks and these projects which deal with these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, David. So I don't know if anyone from IPAM is on the mood to answer.
Well, the one thing I would just note is that I think a lot of what you're saying, David, really resonates with us. And this first project that we have on mapping aims to really take this really divergent set of materials out there and aims and uses and so on, and try to structure it, try to create a framework, and try to not evaluate, and this is a bad metric, this is a good one, although, there are better and there are worse metrics, but try to position them so that we can really link them to the use. In terms of outreach, that's also going to be critical, because if we do this in our own little bubble and don't share it with the world, that is not going to be very useful. So that would be my comment. I'm sure everyone else within the committee has other ideas, but that's my immediate reaction, is that's exactly what we want to do.
Yeah, I agree. I think that in fact, the metrics, the mapping project that we are trying to draft right now and to detail is responding to David's concerns regarding disparate information, also the transversal need to order or structure somehow the efforts that are out there right now. And perhaps we know some of them, perhaps we don't know them, but we felt that there is a need to do this kind of baseline work in order to really then look at the finer detail of metrics. And regarding outreach and communication, I think that we are still building the strategy for IPAM, but I think that some compounds and areas are already in the mapping project, especially when we talk about users and needs, and also usable information. For that, we wanted to survey users or potential users, different actors with different interests behind the use of adaptation metrics. And that's perhaps one way to start the communication within IPAM. But of course, there is a lot of work to do in the platform, and for that we welcome other members that have the energy to work on these issues. So, yeah. Karim, you have the micro off. No, still no audio.
No.
Yeah.
Maybe now?
Yeah. now.
Just one point to make it clear, because I think some people didn't get it right. I mean, IPAM has been founded by five institutions that have their own specialty. Metrics has proved to be a very difficult issue, adaptation metrics, to be taken care of transversely, which we still do on the tools and techniques committee. Otherwise, the three others first founding members are working on specifically cities, agriculture, and water, which have been the subjects of the previous conferences. The university, Mohammed VI Polytechnic, who just joined us, will emphasize more on research and capacity building. And IPAM is open to other sectors to be forming new committees. That's no problem. We're not restrictive at all. We're a platform that just started, and I mean, our first project, you can see it. You can find, of course, we forgot to say it much more in our website about that. Our first project is especially about that, trying to map whatever exists worldwide and trying to build bridges between each other. And we're welcoming you to build these bridges with us. Thank you.
This is the time for the discussion. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So we have all the attendants here. If you wish, you can turn your video on. And also, if you want to raise the questions, we have one question already from Axel Michael Oro. So you have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much. I really like the initiative. It's great. The question, of course, is, well, the space is, of course, crowded. We see initiatives like the GCA. We see, of course, a lot of technical assistance. I remember that, for example, GIZ funded some of the conferences that you, Carl, described as, let's say, the nurturing the ideas. And yeah, I think it is absolutely imperative to see where one could generate a critical mass of, yeah, both technical but also financial support to do the many beautiful things that you've lined out. Because yeah, eventually it all boils down, how many resources does such an initiative have? Because, well, maybe initially people will be willing to put some work free of charge into the committees, but eventually they either, yeah, need to be rewarded in terms of reputation that they've participated in a unique global initiative and set the global standards for adaptation metrics. Great, that might be possible then not to have financial remuneration of the people who do work, but yeah, I'm somehow unsure how the critical mass can be generated to make this really a globally relevant initiative.
So I think that Carl, please, can you take the floor to respond to Axel's question?
Sure, it's a great question. I think a couple of things I'd respond to is one, yes, we need to be focusing on how we can create a critical mass. I think that the way that we've designed and structured the IPAM so far lends itself to that, because it really invites the expert community and the practitioner community to engage directly. It creates a project work-related program for each one of these subcommittees. And as I presented for the inaugural project, it tries to make really the bulk of the actual work to really build up something that can be useful for the global climate community by focusing on projects that can be explicit proposals, can have explicit deliverables, but does it in a way that's stakeholder driven and will therefore hopefully get the buy-in of the important institutions that need the metrics. And I think that's the thing, is that we see not just in the Paris international climate policy environment, but clearly if you look at the private financial community, everything from the move for better ESG and for more climate disclosure through initiatives like the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure, there's a strong call from the people who need the metrics for the metrics. And I think that by addressing that demand will create a dynamic, user-responsive approach that will mean that we're not going to be preparing metrics that sit on a shelf, but are explicitly there to serve a specific need. And so that's why we call upon everyone here to enter into discussions, enter into subcommittees, and enter in as institutional members, and so that we can get that critical mass that I think you're correct to note is essential for us to really get traction and become a game changer in the space. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that there are some interesting questions in the chat. For example, this one from the Global Center on Adaptation. We have here, to which extent do current subcommittees address governance metrics? I think that I can respond to that one on behalf of every subcommittee chair, that we are currently trying to consider or expect to consider governance metrics within its subcommittee. For sure, there are many relevant issues that with current subcommittees we are not covering, or we are not explicitly covering. But we hope that with the action plans and working plans for the following 1-2 years, we can brainstorm how to deal with that, how to design robust action plans that cover priority issues, but are robust enough not to leave any topic behind, but also taking into account the limitations of the resources that we have right now. And this calls again for the sponsorship topic raised by Axel just before. The other question raised by Sander Chan is, to which extent do current subcommittees address different types of non-state or subnational stakeholders apart from cities? That is a good question, and again, is coming to the same response. Because of the history of IPAM and because of the expertise behind current IPAM members, we have built this structure around these subcommittees. So far, there is no member or associate member that addresses these concerns. So we will be very happy to welcome these kind of topics within current action plans, independently if they are specifically situated within current subcommittees or not, or they are cross-cutting, which can be also a very exciting way forward. We need to discuss all these things. This initiative is emerging. We have worked a lot during this year to build this structure, to build this platform, but we are really expecting to welcome more members in order to give more ideas on how this initiative can go forward and can really make progress during the following years and on this topic that we think that is really key to move adaptation forward. So if there is no one else that wants to speak out loud,
I would have a word, just going back to Axel's question and also to the question from GCA. If you read well the title of the webinar, it's a membership opening webinar. As you might know, Morocco has been, since COP22, in the process of organizing international conferences on because we see a need kind of harmonize and find common ways to the question. And we organized a workshop last year calling for institutions to support and start that platform. And we found 5 institutions, each of them specializing in specific topics of adaptation that started the work. And we have, as Carl presented and is summarized in our website, we have a common big project that is appealing for anyone willing and having goodwill to contribute to go ahead. And of course, as we grow up, we will need more finance. And I think maybe we will hire then Axel to find the sources for that because he has good ideas. And back to the question of GCA, if we have already links to UNEP, GCA, whatever, yes, we do. We do have them. We do have them partly as IPAM itself, because we're already discussing a project with UNEP, but we don't have to say, of course, all the projects that we're discussing with each and other. And as the GCA has already links to the AAA Foundation. So the important thing to understand is that we are a platform that just started with ambitions that try to reach the size of their dreams. And you're all welcome to dream with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Karim. That was very poetic and very true. So there is another question in the chat. Is there any time plan for the IPAM initiatives? Perhaps, I don't know, Carl, maybe this can be related to the mapping project. You don't have the audio.
Yes, I think there's 2 different sort of timing issues that would be relevant. One would be more the structural question, and that has to do with how we're organizing ourselves as a body. And I think a couple of things that have happened and need to happen over the next year are we need to bring in more members, in particular institutional members and sponsors, but the associate members clearly are also important. And associate members can really be with different institutions and they can move their membership along over their careers. But what we aim to do over the next, the rest of this year is get the subcommittees organized to bring in the people. We're here to recruit you, not just overall, but for a specific subcommittee. That's why each of us was sort of selling our subcommittee in many respects so that we can excite you to be involved in those, whether you're an institutional member, associate member, or you want to sponsor some activities. So there's that aspect. So over the rest of this year, we're going to be organizing the subcommittees and developing the work plans. And we're going to be enacting those next year with, first of all, the inaugural project that we talked about, but also find other activities that either are things that we can do without just with expertise, with our interest in the subject area, or find sponsors to enact it. The other aspect of this, of course, has to do with our inaugural project on mapping. And that's going to go in phases. And that's going to be a multi-year project, we envision. The first phase, we want to see if we can find sponsorships in the next several months so that we can kick that off and start the work. That, I think, is going to enlighten us regarding what other work program we need to do, because then we're going to find gaps in what's necessary. So I envision that in addition to going to the second phase after well over a year, we're going to be inspired at the sectoral level, but also at the transsectoral level to undertake a variety of projects that fill in essential gaps that the user community has identified in particular. Does that help? I mean, I can't say this month, but that's sort of the trajectory we're on.
I think that that describes very well the things that we've been discussing during the last months on IPAM activities. There are many other interesting questions in the chat. For example, is there an expected time commitment for members to work on the initiatives, and is there an initial target size for the subcommittees? Coming from Daniel Lugbart from Fraunhofer. Thank you for the question. So perhaps I can respond to that. We haven't thought about any time commitment yet. It's a good question, but we expect to have kind of short-term commitment from at least from associate members and institutional members. And we don't have any target size for subcommittees. We have a target size for the steering committee. Of course, we can have as many institutional members as there might be interest. But I think that there is a target size for the steering committee of 15 members, institutional members, I think. So that's the maximum to be in the steering committee. Of course, the steering committee will rotate every 2 years. We have a memorandum of understanding explaining all this structure and all these mechanisms. That it has taken a while to compile and to describe, but we hope that it will be useful. But still, I think that there are many issues that we haven't covered yet, but we expect that during the evolution of IPAM, we can also fix these little details and perhaps improve our memorandum of understanding. Okay, so if any other IPAM member or any other one wants to speak out loud, you are welcome, of course. IPAM, is it open to non-governmental organizations? Karim, can you please respond to that one? Karim is frozen. Karim? Well, IPAM.
I think I lost you.
Okay. There was a question that regarding the membership. Is IPAM open to non-governmental organizations? Okay, we don't have.
Of course.
Okay.
IPAM is open to every goodwill. But I would like to go back to the question from Diana Reckien, because the way she described the question is absolutely the aim of IPAM. I mean, how the adaptation metrics are needed by the practitioners, we understand metrics as a tool to ease monitoring and evaluation. That's exactly actually what we want. We want to reach tools and indicators that can help us monitor progress of the projects and also compare between projects, because this is a big issue. So I thank you very much for the formulation, because it's to me just what we are saying. I think in the project that we are proposing, maybe Carl or Riyad can develop further on this. Yeah, the adaptation metrics are needed by the practitioners. We're coming from the practitioners' end to start the project.
Yeah, that's very much the issue. With the mapping project, what we intend is to respond to this very same question. You can find more details about the mapping project proposal in the website. You can download, I think there is a 1-page or 2-page document describing a little bit more with finer detail what Carl has presented today. And in fact, one of the things that we want to address is user needs, practitioner needs, and also we plan some to map what is happening on the ground, and also to perhaps to do some surveys to practitioners and users and potential users of adaptation metrics to map these needs, to map the resources, to map tools, also tools, techniques, and metrics being used. So, but this is the concept note is just a concept note that needs to be detailed probably during the next months. Yeah, one more question. Has this mapping been attempted by anyone else to your knowledge? Not to mine. Perhaps there have been initiatives scattered around the world in specific topics. For example, as far as I know, and Riyadh has been explaining today, on agriculture, there has been a lot of work, but this always depends on the topic and on the field. Yeah.
I think not to the extent of the proposed project. And I see Axel is raising hand again.
Yes, thank you very much. Just one question, because I earlier mentioned GIZ, which had consistently financed these activities, at least in Morocco. And I note that many Moroccan institutions are leading committees. So is there still an ongoing GIZ funding for the initiative? Yeah, would be interesting because, yeah, again, I think some financial basis is crucial now to get the initiative from the current stage to the critical mass.
Okay, I can answer to that question that, maybe some people get confused because they see me since 4 years at COP22 at GIZ and now at IPAM, but actually I have been all of them, and this is work going on. Now, if you want to know Axel, you don't have to give off all of our cards, but we are in touch with BMZ, yes, and many other funders. We don't have to show up what cards we have, but yeah. Of course, this initiative won't work in a long run with the only financing of its initial founding member, but the founding member have the merit to have started something that we hope will go great and successful.
Thank you, Karim.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. There is another question, and we might be arriving to the end of this webinar today. So the last question from Amjad Babu from CIMIT. Does IPAM target development of new or effective metrics or use new approaches like big data analytics? I think that these are more or less some of the things that we have been discussing for the mapping project. We don't plan to arrive to a stage where we have the knowledge to develop new metrics during the first stage of the mapping project. Of course, each subcommittee can define specific targets, and those might be developing new metrics. But our first transversal project, which covers all subcommittees, including techniques and tools, what we want to do first is mapping what is existing, the needs. And then we thought about a second phase where with all this knowledge and this reference baseline, we can in fact think about new metrics or think about tools and new approaches that may help to build this measurement based on metrics and using big data or using any other techniques available. So we imagine this, we have in our imaginary a platform that helps to do that, but we envision this as a medium long-term objective for transversal objective for IPAM.
May I intervene, Marta, please?
Yes, please.
Yes, that's right. In fact, we want first of all to map what is existing, and in the second phase, assess the gaps, what is missing for each of the teams, sectors, etc. And then, based on what is existing on the ground and what is missing, to try to fill the gaps by many different methodologies and approaches, including modeling, including big data, analytics, and including the new artificial intelligence and whatever, depending on the scientific field. But that are the three phases, and the mapping project is we discussed that as explained by Marta in two phases, but in between there will be in between phase 1 and phase 2, between the mapping and the modeling part, to aggregate metrics to make them simpler or maybe addressed to specific stakeholders like funders, or addressed to practitioners, addressed to governments. And we need to make some modeling, and here come many tools and methodologies. Thank you.
Thank you, Riyad. So I would like now to share my screen again and give the floor to Carl for the final words.
I'd just like to say thanks for all the speakers, especially for Mr. Moxit and Mrs. Lemuffer, for your interventions, for your advice, for your guidance, and your support. I'd like to thank everyone who participated in this and appreciate your feedback. We're going to be analyzing the poll results, but we also want to continue and consider this just a launch of engagement and co-learning. So we hope that this webinar and IPAM is interesting to you and that you'd be interested in joining us. Our next steps are, of course, to absorb your feedback and organize the membership, seek support for our mapping project, convene subcommittees to plan the actions over November and to the end of the year. We're going to try to structure these subcommittees in a manner that matches up with the members' needs and the priorities out there. We want to collaborate with you, whether you're an institution, an associate member, or to discuss sponsorship opportunities. As I said before, we'll be sharing the slides and the poll results and notes on the feedback we've received from you, and hope to speak with you regarding your participation. And so with that, I'd like to say thank you and goodbye until soon. Take care.